Hello, everyone, and welcome to the brief AI podcast preview we have today.
Be once well. Welcome. Today we are stepping straight into the Ma'amar Gadaliya, Tofshin Chabbet. One verse, one question. What makes the third Beis Hamikdash truly greater? The first was grand. The second was grander in some ways. But both were destroyed, so if it's just about lasting forever, why not make the first one immortal?
Whoa.
The
Let's back
Ma'amar
up a little bit.
existence.
You use a lot of Hebrew words and stuff, maybe to simplify things for the audience. Imagine you're talking to someone who knows nothing at all.
Right.
No
Got it.
offense.
Straight talk. The Ma'amar starts with a verse about the last temple being greater than the first. One simple reading says that was the second temple. But the Zohar says last really means the third temple, which will never be destroyed. That raises the real question.
Never be
Is the
destroyed.
whole
Interesting.
greatness-
So the first two temples
Exactly.
in Jerusalem were destroyed, basically. What was the verse talking about
Right.
originally?
The verse is talking about the second temple being physically larger, lasting longer. But the Zohar reads the same words as a prophecy about the final temple. So the Ma'amar asks,
Wow.
if it's just about lasting forever, why couldn't the first one simply have been made to last?
Why couldn't the first one be made to last? What do you mean? It was destroyed. What are you talking about?
Exactly, so, because the first two were finite, meaning
Finite.
they belonged to a reality that could end. It wasn't just a decision to protect it better, it's about a different order of reality.
Whoa, you're skipping all over the
third
place.
isn't-
Why was the first two finite? I mean, they were in finite space. What do you mean by finite? What are you talking about?
Finite here doesn't just mean physically limited. It means their entire spiritual framework was within a system that allows for an end. The Ma'amar ties the third to truth, something that doesn't change or break, meaning the physical structure itself becomes bound up with that unbreakable quality, not just shielded by it from above.
Wait, so the third one is never going to be destroyed? Isn't that just because the third one is made by the creator himself, while the first two were made by humans?
It's a good question. The Ma'amar doesn't settle for that alone.
It does, actually.
Yes,
It does, but not in...
the third
It does say
is
it,
built by
but in the
Hashem.
notes. The third is built by Hashem. First of all, say
Right,
what you...
but-
It does settle it in the notes, which you did not have. But anyway, say what you... What do you think? What do you think? If you had to think on your own.
Be once well. Even if it's built by Hashem, the real chiddush in this Ma'amar is that the world itself, this physical space, becomes able to hold that level. Not just a perfect act from above, but the finite itself becoming a vessel for what is beyond end. Because otherwise it would just be an infinite force overpowering something finite, not finitude itself becoming transformed. That's the kind of eternity we're aiming at here.
So, wait a minute. I'm not really following. You're saying that there's different kinds of eternity now? You're saying that the first two temples could have been built forever somehow, even if they would have been built by a man, but then the third one is forever, but in a greater way than forever? What are you talking about? Come on.
Close, but not quite. The Ma'amar is not saying there are two separate eternities like a weaker and a stronger version.
I think it is,
saying there
actually.
are two ways
Go ahead.
eternity can relate to. One way is that something finite exists and an eternal force just keeps protecting it. Another way is that the finite itself becomes infused with and expresses eternity.
So there are
First
two.
is
So
like
there
a
are
light
two ways.
shining-
Wait. You said there's not two ways of eternity. Now you're saying there are two ways of eternity.
There aren't two eternities, but there are two ways eternity can interact with the world. One way is that something finite exists and an eternal force just keeps protecting it. Another way is that the finite itself becomes infused with and expresses eternity. The first is like a light shining onto a surface. The second is like that surface itself glowing. The third temple is not forever in a greater way than forever. It's forever in a way that the world itself can carry, which is the deeper novelty.
So it is forever in a greater way than forever. Then you're kind of saying contradictory stuff here.
It's not two sizes of forever. There's only one eternity. The difference is where that eternity is revealed. Either it hovers above a finite thing and keeps it going, or the finite thing itself becomes a transparent vessel for it. So same eternity, but radically different placement. The Ma'amar's point is that in the third temple, the world itself holds that truth, not just receives it from above. That's what answers the original why. Why not just keep the first standing forever?
Wait, but
Because
did we really answer the
endless.
question? Like the first one was built by King Solomon, who was a man, and King Solomon was finite. Didn't we know that King Solomon knew that it was going to be destroyed when he built it because he was a finite?
Just a moment. That kind of interruption sharpens everything. So I'd
Brutal.
say, you're right. Shlomo HaMelech knew prophetically that his building could be destroyed. So, historically, no one expected the first temple to be eternal. But conceptually, the Ma'amar is asking a deeper question. What makes the third temple eternal? In its very nature? Is it only who builds it? Just a divine decision to never let it fall? Or is there something essentially different about the revelation bound up with the third? That's the engine of the whole Ma'amar.
Wait, but it's assuming that the first one could have lasted forever.
That is a sharp question. I wouldn't put it that way precisely. The Ma'amar isn't making a historical claim that the first temple was meant to last forever and didn't. It's using the conceptual probe. If you imagine an endlessly preserved first temple, would that automatically make it equivalent to the third? The Ma'amar's arguing no. Therefore, the distinctiveness of the third must lie deeper than just duration.
Well,
We should
I'll tell you in the
text.
notes to the mimer, which I did not give you, but it says in the notes, one of the notes says it brings with something else, that it says if Moses would have entered the land, which is Moshe prayed 515 times to enter the land of Israel, but he did not get to enter the land. But if Moshe did enter the land, then Moses would have built the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, and everything that Moshe builds is for eternal. Like if Moshe wrote the Torah, which is eternal, he built the Mishkan, which is eternal. So if Moshe would have brought us into the land, then he would have built the temple, which would have been eternal. But it says Hashem made him not enter the land in order that it would be able to be destroyed, so that it could be rebuilt in a greater way, which I think you kind of missed out that part also. What do you think about that?
Just a second. That actually strengthens the question. If the notes bring that midrash, then yes, there is a scenario in Chazal where an earlier temple could have been eternal. And precisely because the builder would have been Moshe, that sharpens the Ma'amar's question even more. If an earlier temple could, in theory, have been eternal, then what are we still calling greater about the third? That forces the discussion deeper, not just eternity as in not destroyed, but what kind of eternity and what kind of revelation. That's where I think the Ma'amar is heading.
And then the mimer, when it mentions that, it also mentions something about how the difference between the first two temples and the third is similar to the difference between someone who's perfectly righteous and someone who is a Baal Tshuva, someone who did wrong and then repented afterwards. What does that have to do with anything?
That comparison is central. The Ma'amar links it to the pattern of descent and return. A tzaddik never fell. A Baal Tshuva transforms an actual descent. The return doesn't just erase the fall, it turns it into fuel for a higher connection. In the place where a Baal Tshuva stands, even the completely righteous can't stand. So the Ma'amar maps that onto the temples. First and second are like the path of a tzaddik, immense holiness, but within an order that doesn't go through descent. The third comes after Chorban and Galut. Its greatness is like that of a Baal Tshuva, not because destruction is good, but because after a descent, the return can reveal something that couldn't show up before. That seems to be where the Ma'amar is heading.
Interesting. And it also mentions in the notes, it says that after the Jewish people, the first temple was destroyed, then they were exiled to Babylon for 70 years. Then they came back after they did Teshuvah, and they built the second one. So that means that they already did Teshuvah when they rebuilt the second one. But then it says that the second one was also destroyed on the condition that we should do even greater Teshuvah through this longer exile now. And then what's the thing about the lion, destroying the lion? What does that have to do with it? Also, elaborate on that.
One moment. That is exactly the Myanmar's pivot. The second temple does come after Chuva. So the question becomes, if there was already a return, why wasn't that the final stage? The Myanmar answers by pointing to levels of Chuva. The return from Babel was real, but not the deepest transformation possible. Hence the Midrashic line about the lion. A lion came in the month of the lion and destroyed Ariel, so that the lion would come and rebuild Ariel.
What is Ariel?
Nebuchadnezzar of. Ariel is a name for Jerusalem or the temple. It's not poetry decorating history. It's saying the destruction itself, once it happened, becomes part of a process that leads to a higher rebuilding. But the higher level is not the destruction itself. It's the transformation after the fact. So I'd underline in the podcast, the analogy isn't an identity. The first and second temples were not sins. The destructions were not an ideal. The point is that once a descent has occurred, the ultimate divine purpose is revealed by transforming that descent into a greater ascent. That's the Baal
But just simply, Ariel means lion, right? And that refers to the altar that was on the temple, which was destroyed because it had a image of a lion that was like a fire. There was like a fiery lion image that came down to eat the sacrifices, and it's also an analogy for the Creator as well, right?
Yes, that is a rich layer of the Midrash. Ariel can allude to the altar, to Jerusalem, and also to that lion imagery of heavenly fire consuming the korbanot. The Midrash is weaving all those lion images together. A destructive lion, the month of the lion, the altar called lion, and then ultimately Hashem rebuilding. It's taking one image and running it through every level to say, what looked like raw destruction gets folded into a process whose end is building. That doesn't make the destruction itself an ideal.
I see.
But it does mean the final building carries something new.
So you're saying that the Creator destroyed the temple multiple times in order that each time he destroyed it, he built it back better. The first time he destroyed it in order to have them do teshuvah, to reach the level of someone who does teshuvah, coming back to the Creator. Then we destroyed the second one in order that we should come to a greater level of teshuvah, a greater returning to the Creator, which will last forever. And that's why someone who does teshuvah has a deeper level of infinity connection than someone who's perfectly righteous. And it says that in the notes, or in the parentheses, it says that there's different meanings of when we say someone who's a tzaddik. Someone who's perfectly righteous, it could mean someone who practically does not do anything bad, but he still has a possibility of doing bad. But the Tanya says that someone who's righteous is only refers to someone who has no possibility of even wanting to do bad. And the other term of righteous is only like a borrowed term. So like the Tanya says that the actual only definition of someone who's righteous is someone who has no possibility of ever even wanting to do bad. But someone who does teshuvah, who returns to the Creator, is still considered greater. He says that in the place that those who do teshuvah stand, even the perfectly righteous are unable to stand. So even someone who has no ability to even want to do bad, even though he still serves the Creator in an infinite way, in a way that will never cease, but someone who does teshuvah, even he will also serve the Creator in a way that will never cease in a certain way, but a deeper level of infinity. So like within infinity itself, there's different levels. And so too the temples, which were destroyed in order to reach different levels of returning, also have different levels of infinity tied to the different levels of returning. Right?
One moment. You're circling a very deep reading, but I'd separate a few things carefully. When we start talking about deeper infinities, I just slow down. Hasidus does speak of higher and deeper revelations of the infinite, but it's not saying there are bigger infinities in a literal math sense.
There are.
The advantage of a Baal Tshuva, in the way the Ma'amar is using it, is about transformation, not just more. And with the Tanya's definition of Sadiq, that actually heightens the contrast of Chazal's line. Even compared to a true Tzaddik Gamor, a Baal Tshuva has a unique Maila. But the Ma'amar is using that as an analogy to highlight a qualitative shift, not a quantitative more. And the third temple's eternity is framed in that mode, transformation of the finite itself. That's what I think is trying to protect, not a scale of how infinite something is.
Well, yeah, I think we're kind of talking past each other. Obviously, there's one quantity of infinity, but the whole thing in Maimer is saying that there's different qualities of infinity. Everything could still be an infinity in terms of actual physical quantity, obviously, because infinity is infinity. But within infinity, there's different qualities of how the infinity could work, and that is still there's actual differences between those qualities. It's not just like saying, oh, this way is in this way or that way. There's actual like qualitative differences between how the infinity works, which is the driving force behind each temple.
Just let me think. I think we're actually very close here. We're not talking about different quantities of infinity, but about qualitatively different modes in which the infinite is revealed. That language, different qualities or modes of revelation, does make sense in the framework we're building. So if we phrase it that way, then yes,
Yes, exactly.
first has one quality. The second, coming after exile and tshuva, has another. And the third is not just more eternal. It manifests a different kind of eternity bound up with that deeper transformation.
Interesting, different kind of eternity, right? So different kind of qualitative eternity. And that's the reason why the temples were destroyed, in order to reach the deepest possible level of qualitative infinity, which is the revelation of the four-letter name Havaya, which is the tetragrammaton. In the ultimate level where that combines with the other names. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe.
One moment. Here is how I might put it carefully, because there are a few moving parts that can slide past each other. I wouldn't say the temples were destroyed in order to reach a deeper infinity, full stop. That can sound as though
It does say it though. As though what?
it's its own positive goal.
What? You're like skipping
The way
out,
the
dude.
Mama frames it,
Wait, whoa, start over. You're like kind of good at, kind of like getting all over the place.
I'll
Got
build
like,
it.
wait, whoa. You're still there? Start over. Come on, be real. This AI is getting crazy. Okay, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Yeah. So what were we just talking about?
Right, so we were deep in this Ma'amar about the third temple and different kinds of eternity, right? And how that ties to Teshuvah.
Teshuvah, returning. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
basically, the Creator says destroyed the temples in order to have the temples rebuilt in a greater way, in order for us to reach deeper levels of qualitative infinity through returning to the Creator in greater ways, right?
Yeah, basically. But I'll sharpen the language a bit. The Ma'amar's point is not that destruction is a goal. It's that once there was a descent, the return from that place can reveal a level that straight holiness doesn't. First temple is like a tzaddik, holiness from above. Second is already after teshuvah, but not the deepest transformation yet. The third comes after the longest, darkest galus. So its eternity isn't just infinite light imposed on a finite thing. It's the finite itself revealing that it was never truly separate from the infinite. That's a different mode of the same infinity. Not bigger, but differently placed. And that's where Havaya and Elohim being truly one become central.
Yeah, but the Creator did everything with an intent, right? Obviously, everything happens because the Creator makes it happen for a reason.
Right.
It's contradicting itself.
Yeah, yes. But here is where we have to be careful with the words. Good. It's that in the Creator's intent, the possibility of descent is only to reach a higher ascent, so that the world itself becomes the vessel. That's how the Ma'amar is steering it. The intent is for the world itself to reveal the deepest truth, not that the fall is the goal.
Yeah, obviously.
That helps keep the... Right. Yeah, that helps keep the language clean and focused.
Right. So yeah, the Creator destroyed the temples in order to reach a higher level of revelation. Basically, the goal is not the destruction, but the goal of the destruction is for the
Yeah.
ascent that happens afterwards to the
Yes.
greater qualitative
Exactly.
infinity.
Right. Not that destruction is the revelation, but that the return after destruction is what reveals the deeper level. So first there's tzaddik, then Baal Teshuvah, then the deepest Teshuvah that brings the eternal third temple. That's the line.
Right, and we say earlier in the discourse that the first temple was in the merit of Abraham, who called it the mountain where the Lord will be revealed. Then the second temple was in the merit of Isaac, who says that when Isaac was in that same place, that he went out to pray in the fields, which is also the same mountain location. And the third temple is in the merit of Yaakov, who went down to sleep on the Temple Mount, and then he slept on the temple in the same area that Abraham built the altar for Isaac. And then Jacob took the rocks from that place, which were the leftover rocks from the altar that Abraham built to bind Isaac, which are still there. Then Jacob put the rocks around his head. Then he dreamt about a ladder going up from the earth to the heavens. And then he took the rocks. The rocks miraculously became one rock. And then Jacob moved the rocks from the place of the altar to the place of the future ark. And then he made a monument and said, "This is the house of the Creator." And he also said, "How awesome is this place? Because Havaya, the four-letter name of the Creator, is in this place." What do you think about that from the discourse?
Right. But yeah, it's a strong structure. Abraham sees a mountain. Yitzhak lives a field. Yaakov calls it a house, a permanent dwelling, not a revelation that just shows up and leaves. And the sharp point, Yaakov says both Achen Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, Havaya is in this place, and calls it Beis Elokim. That's the whole Ma'amar in one line. Havaya revealed in a makom, in a finite place. The house that becomes the model for the third temple, where it's not just holiness entering a space, but space itself revealing that oneness.
Wait, so there's two different names of the Creator. One name, he says that it's like a house of Elohim. Another place, he says that the name of Havaya, the level of Havaya, which is a four-letter name, is in this place. And we know that the world is created through the 10 statements of creation. Let there be this, let there be light, let there be a sky, let there be this. And those 10 statements are said with the name Elohim. But the place of the temple, we say, it has the name of level of Havaya. So does that mean that the place of the temple is not created with the 10 statements? But how does it exist? And what's the difference between the two names?
But yeah, excellent question. And the short answer is no. The place of the temple is created. It has measurements. It's through Elohim like everything else. The chiddush, the novelty, is that there Elohim doesn't hide Havaya the usual way. The place is fully a makom, yet transparent to Havaya. That's why Yaakov can say both Havaya in this place and Beis Elohim. It's finite space, but the finite is not opaque. It becomes a vessel. Think of the Ara. It has measurements.
The ark.
But makom ha'aron eino min hamada.
The place of the ark is not from the measurement. Gotta say English.
Exactly.
Gotta say English things.
Yes, yeah. The place of the ark is beyond measurements. So not because it's fake space, but because real space there is a vessel for beyond space. So it exists through Elohim, but Elohim there reveals Havaya instead of hiding it.
So what does the discourse say is the difference between the two names of Elohim and Havaya? And what's the difference between the place of the temple, even before the temple was built, and the places of the rest of the world?
Yeah, the Ma'amar is doing two things at once. First, Havaya is the name for what is beyond time and beyond limitation. Elohim is the name for creating with measure, with concealment. That's why the 10 statements use Elohim. Second, in the world at large, Elohim mostly hides Havaya. A stone feels like just a stone, like regular space. But the place of the Beis Hamikdash, even before any building, is a makom where the concealment doesn't work the normal way. The finite space there can reveal Havaya. That's why it's called Beis Elohim, and yet Havaya is present. It exists through the system of Elohim, but Elohim there becomes a vessel rather than a filter. So the rest of the world says finite heights, infinite. That place says finite can reveal infinite. That's the qualitative shift that later becomes fully manifest in the third Beis Hamikdash, when physical reality itself becomes a permanent vessel for that oneness.
Okay, so what's the actual difference between the two names? It says that it goes on like a whole explanation about how the rest of the world is created through Elohim and it feels distant from the Creator, while the place of the temple has a revelation of Havaya directly through Elohim, and then the creation that happens through Havaya is like a different parallel universe kind of thing, or a different stage of existence. How does that work?
Right, I'm checking. Yeah, now we're right at the nerve. It's not a parallel universe. We're talking about two modes in one reality. Havaya is the infinite source as it is. It creates effortlessly, but if that were felt directly, the world wouldn't feel itself at all. It would just be absorbed in its source. Elohim is the power that gives measure and concealment, so that there can be a defined world with sky, earth, directions, time, and separate beings. In the ordinary world, Elohim hides Havaya. In the Beis Hamikdash, Elohim itself becomes a clear vessel, so you get Havaya shining through Elohim. It's the same reality, but the place of the Mikdash shows how finite space can reveal its infinite source without stopping being space. And the ultimate Chiddush is not just light overpowering a vessel, but the vessel itself revealing that it was always rooted in oneness. That's the direction the Ma'amar is pushing toward.
Wait, but what's the actual difference in the mode of creation between how Elohim creates things and how Havaya creates things, and what are the different analogies that are used to explain that? Thinking for a long time. Come on.
Yes. I'm still on it.
Brutal. Craziness. It's not that hard.
Bia, okay, clean version. Havaya creates bederech mimela effortlessly from above, like light from the sun. The light stays visibly tied to its source. Elohim creates bederech itlapshut by entering into measure and detail, like a teacher compressing a huge idea into tiny words, or speech breaking inner depth into finite letters. That's why creation is through 10 statements. So the analogies the Mamar uses are Ur v'Ma'ur, light and luminary, for Havaya; Rav v'Talmid, teacher and student, or speech, for Elohim. In the world generally, those contractions hide the source. In the Beis Hamikdash, the same contraction functions as a transparent vessel, so measure itself reveals the source. That's how Havaya and Elohim are not two tracks here, but one truth. The finite revealing the infinite. Not another universe, but this one seen at its deepest point.
I think the analogy of the student and teacher was kind of brought later, but like in the context when it's talking about the difference between creation, automatic creation, and like creation that involves like active involvement, there was different things. You used like an example of like throwing a stone upward. Can you elaborate on that? And what does it mean for creation to happen automatically as opposed to manually? And what does that even mean when it comes to the creator who makes both ways anyway?
Yeah, right. The teacher-student mashal shows up later. Here, the stone thrown upward is the key image for force within the result. A stone doesn't rise by itself. It goes up only because the thrower's power is invested inside it. That's hitlapshut, active investment. In contrast, sunlight just shines from the sun. That's mimela, automatic. Applied to the names, Havaya is like the sun's light, source revealing. Elohim is like throwing the stone. Divine power is enclosed in a finite thing that then feels separate.
Can you like elaborate though? Like we say Havaya is like the sunlight, is like the sun, and then the creation is like the light from the sun. But in the analogy, the light from the sun is not its own existence, but the creation is its own existence. So what other analogy does it use to parallel that? And what's the difference between the two analogies?
Let me just line that up.
Craziness. AI doesn't know how to make up its mind.
But yes, yeah, exactly. So sunlight's weakness. Light isn't an independent thing, but creation is. So the Maimar also uses cause and effect. An effect is more its own thing, but it's still relatable to its cause. So neither moshel is perfect. So the light is totally nullified. Cause and effect is somewhat independent, but still in the same ballpark. And the stone thrown upward gets an investment of force within something that remains other. So the Maimar strings them together to safeguard both sides, real existence and total dependence. And the Beis HaMikdash is where that paradox shows itself in physical space.
Why is that? And what's the difference between if say the rest of the world is like a simpleton's place, while the place of the temple is like a beyond simpleton? What does that have to do with it? And how does that relate to the two names again? Brutal.
BS, you mean Etahadot, the everyday place.
Yeah.
And by the Mikdash we say this is not an ordinary place. So everywhere else created through the 10 statements is ragil, divided, finite. But the Mikdash is also a makom. But it's a makom where Elohim doesn't hide Havaya. It reveals it. So ordinary space hides, that space reveals. That's why even the measurements there behave differently. It's finite, but it doesn't box out the infinite.
And you're saying that relates to the way how the name Havaya is kind of like the sunlight, or like a sun, or like metaphorically, where it's like just an infinite revelation of the source. That's like infinitely beyond the concept of manual creation, so to speak. But then the creation that happens through that mode is like automatically, and when it's automatic, then that means that the things that are created feel like they are totally nullified to the source, just like the light of the sun is like nullified to the source of the sunlight. It's connected constantly. While the things that are created through Elohim, which manually, so to speak, hides everything, then those creations feel separate. Even though you would think it's kind of the opposite, because if you would think if a source of creation is closer to you, then you would feel closer to it, and if it's further away qualitatively, then you would maybe feel further away. But this says the opposite. How does that work?
Hang on.
Brutal.
That's the paradox. The key is closeness has two meanings. Elohim is close in investment, but because it's clothed, it's hidden. Like the stone rising, the force is inside but not apparent. Havaya is beyond investment, so when it shows a source. So the creation feels batel. So Elohim is hidden closeness. Havaya has revealed transcendence. That is why the world feels separate, and the Mikdash is the exception. Elohim there is transparent and reveals Havaya. The garment itself reveals the source.
Interesting. The garment itself reveals the source. And how do we see that? Like what miracle specifically was like one of the main things how we see how that happened in the temple?
1 second. But yes, the classic one is that the Aaron took up no space. You had real measurements, but when you measured the room, it didn't subtract space. That's the point. Measurement and beyond measurement at once. That's Elohim revealing Havaya, not erasing space, but space itself revealing its source.
And how does that work? What does the name Havaya actually mean? And how does it tie in the name of what it means to what this miracle happened? And how is that relevant to anything at all?
I'm checking. But yes, Havaya means two things here. both related directly to that miracle. It is the name of the Creator as the one who brings existence into being constantly from nothing. And it also means past, present, and future as one, above time, and so, by extension, above measured space. So the Aaron having measurements is Elohim, but not taking up space is Havaya. That's why it matters. It shows not a magic trick, but a truth. Finite space itself revealing the beyond space source that sustains it every instant.
Okay, so you're saying the place of the ark was like measurable, but also beyond measurement at the same time. And what was like the question? And but how, what does that? What does the actual name Havaya mean? Like asked, what is the etymology of the name Havaya, the four-letter name, and how does that relate to time and space?
1 minute. But yes. So the question is exactly that. If the Aaron is a physical object, how can it have measurements and not take up space? And the etymology of Havaya is from being. Haya, Hove, Yehiyeh, as one.
What does that
Past,
mean? What is that
present,
in English?
Future as one.
What does that mean in English again?
It entails that for us, time is in pieces, but Havaya isn't in the pieces at all. It isn't just that the Creator lasts forever. Time itself comes from Him. So He's not bound by its limits. The same with space. So when that level is revealed in the place of the Aaron, you get a measured object that doesn't occupy measured space. And that's not a side point. That's the whole message we're building to. The finite can be a vessel for that which is beyond finite. That's the core claim about the third Beis Hamikdash.
Wait, but just real quick, the actual etymology of Havaya, you kind of started, then you started speaking in Hebrew and not actual English. What does it actually mean in Hebrew? In English.
Let me just get that cleanly.
Brutal.
But yes, in plain English, Havaya means being, the one who brings all into being. And it also means beyond time, was, is, and will be, all as one. So don't translate it as Lord. The actual sense is the one who is existence itself, beyond time, bringing everything into being.
But those are two different things, right? If it's beyond time, but he's also bringing things into being, those seem to be two different meanings.
Just a second. But yes, they are two facets, but of the same root. From the aspect of being, Havaya is beyond time. From that same root, it is also the one who brings all into being. So it's one root expressing both sides. And that's why the miracle fits this name. The source of space, not bound by space, revealed within space.
So you're saying that the name Havaya is, was, is, and will be, but as one word. And that's why the creator is beyond time. And just like he's beyond time, he's also beyond space. So that's why, that's the source of why the place of the ark is beyond space. But it's also a combination of space because it combines with the name Elohim, and the name Elohim is the source of the division of space. And then it says that really the name Havaya, it's really beyond space, but it still has the idea of time because it says past, present, and future as one, which means it still has past, present, and future. It's just that there's no division between the three. And so too in space, it has the 6 directions of space, but there's no division between them. But the name Elohim is what creates the actual division between the different levels of space and time, which is why we have the place and beyond space at the same time, right? Elaborate.
1 moment. BS. Yes, that's the idea, with one tweak. Don't say Havaya has time. Say Havaya is the source of time, where past, present, future are unified. Then Elohim makes those divisions actual. Same with space. At the root, not divided, then divided. That's exactly how the Aaron works. Elohim gives measurement. Havaya makes that measurement not ultimate. Together, measured and beyond. That's the fusion the mimer is after.
Okay. So now, and what was the question we had about that? Like, how could we have both a combination of beyond space and space at the same time? What was the question we said?
1 moment. BS. The question is, how can one physical place hold both at once? If it's Havaya revealed, why isn't measurement gone? If measurement remains, why isn't Havaya hidden? That's the contradiction that drives the whole Maimon. How can Havaya and Elohim be one, both revealed? And that's what the third base Hamikdash resolves.
How does it resolve that? And like what does that even mean? Like how could it possibly resolve that? And how does it resolve it?
To just get that clean?
Brutal.
But yes, it resolves it by saying the contradiction only exists if Habaya and Elohim are two. At the deepest level, they're one. When that oneness is revealed, measurement doesn't fight beyond measurement, it reveals it. So the Aaron is not half and half, it's both fully, because the source is beyond both, and can hold both without conflict. But that's the unique eternity of the third base Hamikdash. Finite itself becomes a vessel for the eternal. Not one overpowering the other, but both revealed as one.
Okay, interesting. But so what's that? How is that different though between the first temples? How the place of the ark was beyond space and time within the first temples, and how that's going to be in the third temple exactly? What's the difference of qualitative infinity exactly?
One moment. Baha. So the first temple already had that phenomenon, but it was a revelation inside the world, kind of exceptional and miraculous. A place where Havaya shone into measure. The third is the world itself being aligned with that truth. Not a miracle that happens within it, but the finite itself declaring its root. That's the qualitative difference. Not more forever, but forever expressed through finitude.
So you're saying the first, so there's different qualitative differences of infinity. What
Yes.
like what are they exactly? I mean, I kind of missed what you said exactly. Like, make it more simple and more exciting.
Sure. Baha, yeah, simple and sharp. Not different amounts of infinity, but different modes of revelation. So the world, generally, Elohim hides Havaya. The world feels separate. First temple, Havaya shines within measured space, like the ark being beyond measure. It's a breakthrough inside the system. Third temple, the system itself shows it's one with the infinite. Finitude itself becomes the revelation. That's the deeper qualitative infinity.
But what's the actual difference between the two?
Let me just frame it. The difference is it a miracle within finitude, or is finitude itself the vessel? First temple, infinity breaks through the limits. Third temple, the limit itself reveals infinity. That's why it's eternal in a deeper way. Not just preserved forever, but because the world's own fabric is aligned with that truth. So it's not infinity overpowering the world, it's the world itself declaring infinity. That's the Hiddush, the novelty. Same finite space, but instead of being negated, it becomes the way the infinite is revealed. And that's the qualitative infinity.
And that's why we said that it's an infinity that does not have any possibility of breaking, even though the first infinity could also be infinity forever, but it's like within itself, because of itself, it has no possibility of breaking. Just like someone who does teshuva, because of themselves and their own efforts, like have a deeper connection, as opposed to someone who just someone who's a righteous who just got rid of their possibility of wanting to do bad. That's different. Like kind of the analogy. So what do you think about that? And also, how does this relate to the ingathering of the Jewish people to Israel, which will only happen after the temple is built? Why is that based on this? And talk in a more exciting way. You sound pretty bland.
So yes, that's basically the thrust. First temple, eternity from above. Third temple, eternity because the world itself has been transformed. So no possibility of breaking because the level itself doesn't allow for separation anymore. Baal Teshuva isn't just clean, he's taken the place of distance and turned it into closeness. That's deeper. Now, ingathering. If the third temple reveals that the world itself is one, then the Jewish people, scattered in all the divided corners, naturally get drawn back to that revealed center. Temple first, then ingathering. First, the oneness is revealed, then all the scattered pieces return to that unity. Heart first, then the blood regathers into it.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that this revelation of the Creator, we said, who's beyond past, present, and future as one, and since the time is all one, so the space is also all one relative to the name of Havaya, and that name is combined with the name of Elohim in a way that both of the names are like one. So when that's revealed in the temple, which will miraculously fall out of the sky from the heavens, so when the temple is revealed, which will have the revelation of Havaya of past, present, and future, and the six directions as one, then that's why the six directions of the world will miraculously gather back all of the Jewish people to Israel because of that, right?
1 second. Baha, close. The six directions don't disappear, they stop being separators. So space stays space, but it itself becomes a vessel for unity. That's why the ingathering follows. Once the center, the Mikdash, is revealed as the place where Havaya and Elohim are one, then all the edges flow back to that point. People return because the oneness that was hidden there becomes revealed. So it's not geography collapsing, it's geography revealing its source.
Right. We do say a verse. What's the verse that we quote a verse where the Creator speaks to the six directions or to the four directions plus up and down, which it says six directions, and then he says that it's as if the directions themselves are helping the exile. It does say that in the text. Look it up.
Checking. Baha. Yeah. Yeshayahu Mem Gimel. Mizrach Avizarefa Mimara Vakabetsefa. Omalataf on Tenu Ulateman al Tiflai. I will say to the north, give, and to the south, do not hold back. And this is key, because it's not just that God gathers from the directions, he speaks to the directions themselves. Meaning the directions stop being barriers and become active servants of the Geula. That's exactly the same move. Elohim as division turning into Elohim as a revealed vessel for Havaya. So the same six directions that once scattered the people now help bring them home. That's the depth of that verse.
And how does this relate to the other things that are going to happen after? First, we have the temple being built. Then we have the ingathering of the exiles. Then we have the resurrection of the. We have the resurrection of the dead as well. But before that, we also mentioned the fact that this revelation where we have in the temple, where we said like the place of the ark is like in measurement and beyond measurement at the same time, where it's like combination of space and beyond space. We say that's going to be in the entire world as well.
1 moment. Baha, exactly. The ark is the sample. In miniature, space is itself a vessel for beyond space. The third temple makes that redemption would be like for me. If the revelation is that everything finite shows its source, then that changes how all creation is lived with, including how people relate to things like technology. What I can say,
Interesting.
in the frame of the Mimar, right, what's striking is that the highest revelation isn't escaping the world, it's the world itself becoming the vessel. That's a pretty radical claim.
It's pretty radical because it's true.
Yeah, if it's true, then it's not only radical, it's world defining.
Right. But like, what's the conclusion of all this that you think from all this that we talked about? Like what's the main point you think? What's the main idea? What do you have to walk away with?
Mm. Be here. The main point I walk away with is that the Maimar is pushing one core idea. The most complete revelation isn't escaping finitude, it's that finitude itself becomes the language of the infinite. That's why the ark is measured yet beyond measure. Why Yaakov says Be Elohim and Havaya together. And why the third Dis Mikdash, in this view, isn't just longer lasting but categorically different. The world doesn't stop being a world, it finally tells the truth about what it's been all along.
Right. And can you elaborate about the two lions? The lion destroying, which was Nebuchadnezzar kind of thing, but it's also referring to the creator in a different way, so to speak. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Right. Yeah, the Maimah brings that medrash about the lion. A lion came in the constellation of a lion, destroyed the lion, so that the lion will come and build the lion. Nebuchadnezzar is the first lion. The Beis Hamikdash is also called a lion, and the final lion is Hashem rebuilding. The point there isn't just poetic symmetry. It's saying that what looked like pure destruction is ultimately sourced in the same divine reality that will be fully revealed in the rebuilding. That doesn't make the pain unreal, but it frames the arc. The same history that held the concealment will disclose that the goal was the indestructible revelation. It's a very bold, unifying claim.
And finish off, like, what do you think about any more differences between the name Elohim and Havaya that we didn't touch on? We say that Havaya says it's a revelation of the source, on the one hand, infinitely beyond the idea of creation. That's why when creation happens from the level of Havaya, everything that's created from Havaya at that parallel level of reality is like nullified to its source, like light from the source of light. But it's also a separate existence, like emotions coming out of intellect. While the name Elohim, while it's closer to reality, so to speak, you might think you would feel closer, but it's closer in the sense that it's closer involved. It's more closely involved to hide itself, so that things that come from Elohim are more concealed. What do you think about that?
I'm checking. One moment. Biha, what you're touching is the paradox at the heart of it. There are two kinds of closeness, right? One's closeness that is revealed, and then there's closeness that's concealed. Havaya is close as source, and it's revealed as source. That's why the analogy is light and luminary. The effect never forgets its cause. Elohim is close in investment, so to speak, but because it's clothed, it's hidden. So it enables a world that feels separate. So they're not two rival forces. The goal isn't to erase Elohim, it's that Elohim itself becomes a clear vessel for Havaya, which is exactly what the Beis Hamikdash is modeling. Measurements and structure and stones, yet within that very structure, the source is revealed. And that's the third temple's Kiddush in this framework. Not more miracle against nature, but nature itself expressing its source. That's the qualitative shift.
Interesting. And just to finish off, what was the difference between the two analogies of intellect and emotions, cause and effect, versus light and a luminary and a source of light?
Checking. Biha, I think that's actually elegant. Light and luminary shows absolute dependence. Perfect for a revelation where the source is obvious, but too absolute to explain a world that feels like it's its own thing. Cause and effect, like intellect and emotions, shows how something can emerge with its own feel, but that's still too close a family resemblance. So the Maimar adds investment images like force in a thrown stone, where the source is present within but hidden. Each analogy maps one facet, and the beauty is in not collapsing them into one. It builds a richer sense of how Havaya and Elohim can be one.
Anything else to finish off with, like 20 seconds of like what's your final thoughts of the future temple coming?
One moment. Biha, my last thought would be it's a vision where the world you live in, with all its texture and limits, isn't discarded but becomes transparent to its deepest truth. That's a very ambitious and kind of beautiful claim to end on.
Yes, we should have the third Jewish temple right now, fall out of the sky in Brooklyn, New York, in the good Israel.